stranger to us. They have spoken here at First D on a number of occasions, and always stimulated thought. So help me welcome to the podium Reverend Kimble Sorrells.
Right. How's this one sound? Are we okay? Good. Okay. Well, it is lovely to be back with you all this morning and to sort of explore these questions around the unknown, both sort of in our spiritual walks, thoughts, lives, as well as sort of our day-to-day lives. And I thought about this and I thought, well, this is sort of not something we talk about much because it feels like many folks in our society today seem to have a whole lot of certainty, right? They are certain that their way is the best. They are certain that their views are 100% correct all of the time, and they are definitely certain that if yours are different, then they are wrong. The ability to sort of see nuance, to see sort of shades of gray and questions feels a little bit like a lost art today. And I get it, right? Certainty feels comfortable, or at least gives us the illusion of security. I've shared with you a little bit, if you know sort of my story, you know that as a teenager, I had this sort of religious orientation that was very, very certain, right? My religion was the true answer, the way to heaven and an afterlife that we were also very certain we would go to, and others somewhere else, right? Truth and doctrines were absolute. And there was also this sort of constant fear, right, of hell. So holding on to this faith and this certainty was really critical to sort of feel secure in the midst of all of that. But even folks who maybe have a less extreme version of faith, right, still often want to have a sense of certainty, right? They want to feel like maybe God is in control of things, or that things are part of a plan or a purpose, even when difficult or bad things happen. So as much of some of these ideas or this sense of certainty seem comforting for a time, as life brought me challenges and questions, I found that these answers just sort of weren't really holding up, right? They felt simple at best, but oftentimes even problematic. So the first time that I really felt like I was really, really shaken from this certainty was really when I was an AmeriCorps member right after college. I was serving in one of the homeless shelters here in Atlanta that's now since closed, but it was a pretty destitute shelter. It was really run down, not the resources that it needed to meet the need. And as someone sort of young, found myself kind of being like, where is God in this? Right? The teachings I had grown up with that God would provide fell flat to me as I was meeting people day in and day out who were no less better of a person than me. They were oftentimes no less faithful, and yet they found no divine provisions. Where was God? The simple answers that I had grown up with for why maybe God let bad things happen just didn't make sense. They didn't hold up. They didn't hold water. Now, we could spend a whole service on the question of suffering, but we only have 20 minutes. So for now, I'll just say something in me had to shift, right? The framework and the faith that I grew up with was lacking in its ability to help me to make sense of the world around me, let alone my own experiences. Coming to these moments in life that feel like life as we know it no longer makes sense can really be distressing and disorienting. We like things to make sense. We like things to feel a certain amount of security, that things are going to go the way they should go. We want to feel at ease, that life will continue along the trajectory that we expect it to. We like things to feel clear or known, and we like things to feel safe. But I have also found that at times these places of unknown, whether it's spiritual questions, life questions, can be an opportunity to discover the divine, to discover more of that mystery, and perhaps as well to grow in our own sense of strength and resilience. It wasn't long after that year in AmeriCorps that I started seminary, and I was really lucky that the first semester I was able to take a course in mysticism. I'm not really quite sure how I got into this course as a first semester student, but things sometimes do work out for a good thing. So as we studied these mystics, one of the things that came up, a common sort of thread of the way that the mystics approach spirituality, was this idea of the via negativa, or the negative way. So this is a method often called apophatic theology. This is where one sort of systematically asserts what God or the divine is not, rather than trying to say what it is that God or the divine is. In doing so, it seeks to move beyond the human concepts of language for God or the divine in an effort to show that this divine presence, or whatever it is that is to you, is ultimately beyond understanding. So while an affirmative theology might say something like God is love or God is truth, this negative way seeks to unknow these concepts altogether in order to become more aware of what it is that the divine truly is. St. John of the Cross wrote it this way: to reach union with the wisdom of God, a person must advance by unknowing rather than knowing. To him and to other mystics, language about God, concepts, symbols are helpful only initially, and that they sort of help to point us towards the divine. But at some point, these languages, these words, these symbols actually become a hindrance. Wherein we sort of, if we stay in these concepts and these language and this sense of known, we aren't actually able to connect to that mystery, to the divine that is beyond language, that is beyond understanding. So this sort of spirituality of unknowing relinquishes and moves beyond words and concepts of the divine, recognizing that they ultimately fall short of the divine reality. So mysticism seeks to experience the divine, which is beyond words, beyond understanding or concepts. It strips away the focus on intellectual understanding and instead moves us towards trusting in, perhaps you call it a presence, something more, some mystery, but trusting into and experiencing that divine. There is a text, and the author is unknown. It's a late 14th century text called The Cloud of Unknowing that really speaks to this. It uses masculine language for God. I'm going to change it just to be more inclusive, but acknowledging that I am doing that. And it says this: for when you first begin to undertake it, all that you find is a darkness, a sort of cloud of unknowing. You cannot tell what it is, except that you experience in your will a simple reaching out to God. This darkness and this cloud is always between you. No matter what you do, it prevents you from seeing them clearly in the light of understanding in your reason, and from experiencing them in the sweetness of love and your affection. For if you are able to experience them, or to see them at all, insofar as it is possible here, it must always be in this cloud and in this darkness. What this author is saying, and is what really so many mystics spoke to, is that if we are to fully experience the divine, it's not actually through our intellect or our words or theology or understanding, but rather simply in this place of the unknown, as a sort of simple reaching out to and connecting to the divine. So discovering this as a young seminarian who had wrestled with so many questions and so much frustration of everything that I was seeing around me, this sense of mystery as a means of connecting was something that was actually really comforting to me. I found myself being at sort of a place of peace with the unknown, a place that my mind couldn't articulate, but that my heart could rest in. Resting in that presence, perhaps everything didn't actually have to make sense. Perhaps I didn't actually need a well-articulated argument and thesis for everything. Perhaps some things are just beyond our understanding, or our words are simply just something that we have to lean into. I still find myself coming to many places in life where I find that there are questions and not answers. But I'm finding that leaning into the spirituality of knowing, unknowing, and mystery has allowed me to say that while I don't always have the answers, or while things don't always make sense, I can find joy and comfort in grounding in my spiritual practices and connecting into that divine mystery. So this divine mystery, I may call it God, but you may call it something else, is not connected to from a place of understanding or intellect, but rather simply just connection. I don't particularly have to know the answers, but I can simply just return to that sacred, to that thing that is more than whatever that is for us. The mystics, after all, believed that approaching spirituality with that sense of certainness, the sense that I know, is actually a hindrance then, right, to getting us to really, truly experiencing that mystery, that which is beyond words. Whether you call that God, love, the power of nature, or anything else that is sacred to you. When we approach that which is sacred from a place of certainty, we miss the chance to discover something more, something that puts us at awe or moves us in ways that are beyond our understanding. And this kind of negative way, this type of theology is not just a Christian phenomenon. It can be seen in many of our spiritual traditions in some ways. So in Hindu teaching, which far predates Christianity, often uses this same similar theology of negation. For example, there's a phrase in the Upanishads, it's a well-known phrase, neti neti, which just means not this, not that. It's meant to convey that one cannot speak of Brahma, which is that divine reality in Hinduism, cannot speak of Brahman directly or definitively. Rather, Brahman is ultimately beyond comprehension. And Buddhism also has a similar kind of negative approach to understanding. While Buddhism doesn't have a concept of a creator deity in the same way that theistic religions do, this sort of apathetic or negative approach is seen in other Buddhist doctrines, like the idea that there is no self or the idea of emptiness. And I don't think that the object of your spirituality even needs to be God or even a formal faith tradition. Anyone who has ever been in love can find themselves in a place where words fall short. Finding yourself awestruck by nature usually comes from experiencing it, rather than necessarily having a deep scientific knowledge of the ecosystem. That knowledge is great, and sometimes if you're more focused on whether the rock formation is this or that, maybe you might just actually miss the awe. So I believe that approaching our spirituality with this disposition of unknowing can help us to truly connect to the divine or whatever is sacred to us from a deeper place, a place from our hearts and our spirit, rather than from our heads and our intellect. And still, as we all know, and as we began with, the unknown is also very scary. It's one thing to sort of approach our spirituality and our spiritual practices in this way, but what about that day-to-day life stuff? Surely it's better to have all of that figured out and squared away. Surely it's better to have all the answers. Surely it's better to have everything all planned out. Perhaps. It would certainly feel easier. If everything in my life made sense and went just according to plan, that would definitely feel a lot easier at times. But uncertainty comes our way at one point or another. And while, again, I don't think that everything happens for a reason or that everything is necessarily a good thing, I have found that sometimes these moments of uncertainty can provide us a place to grow and to cultivate resilience, to become more grounded in the present moment. On the more positive side of that, sometimes the unknown might offer us something that we might not seek out otherwise. Much like staying in the realm of certainty in our spirituality can kind of hold us back from fully experiencing the divine, sometimes staying in that place of safety of known might actually keep us from living into our fullest potential. What opportunities might we miss or pass over if we simply always stay in our safe zone of what is known or what feels comfortable or predictable? I know at times in my life I have found myself following a path more out of being on a sort of like autopilot rather than in a sense of intentionality or passion. It's easy to follow the safe path, the known path. Sometimes the unknown might actually offer us something more. And of course, I also don't want to romanticize that, right? And say that this is always the case. Sometimes the unknown is just hard. Sometimes it's scary, and sometimes it's risky or even dangerous. We can't control this. We can't make the uncertain times go away. But I do think that we can sort of change how we engage with it. We can cultivate growth or resilience in these unknown times. I think I was here last time. I think it was 2 weeks after the election. And I share with you that, like many of us at that time, my sense of security and plans and direction in life felt pretty rocked right after that election. Yeah. Just sort of on a pragmatic professional level, the year before I had mostly been spent researching doctoral programs and was actually starting to begin gathering materials to apply for that. And that sort of all just went out the window. It's unclear if these programs that I'm interested in, because of the content and the interest I have in trans research, will survive the sort of anti-DEI, anti-academic everything of the Department of Education. The research that I would be interested in certainly wouldn't be funded and possibly censored. And these are disruptions, right, that are just on a professional level. So on a much more personal level, right, we day to day in my family are sort of watching and wondering, at what point does it become unsafe to be trans in this country? I don't know. So trying to just sort of navigate resisting and doing the work and trying to fight back while also sort of trying to figure out how, if at all, we can keep ourselves safe in that is sort of a constant unknown and worry. None of those things are okay, right? And while, sure, maybe in some of this I might go and explore some things that I wouldn't have, and maybe I'll discover something great in the midst of that. But most of the time it's really just kind of confusing and unpredictable and unknown. This is a really difficult unknown time. And what I'm finding in this over the last few months is that sort of in facing this uncertainty, it has actually allowed me to deepen my practice, deepen my need to sort of stay grounded and in the present moment, and to really try to lean into my resilience. I have just sort of had to face and accept that there is much that is unknown in this time, including potential for harm. But part of that has also helped me to recognize that really that sense of security and known was always a little bit of an illusion in the first place. See, that we, like I said, we have always had to face and accept unknown, right? Even when things seemed predictable, even when things seemed a lot more predictable and more certain, there was always potential for harm. There was always danger, and there was always potential for disaster, for things to go wrong. This time of uncertainty has really allowed me to see and sort of have to face the fact that really all of life is uncertain. I read an account this week of one of the survivors of the flooding in Texas, which was really heartbreaking, obviously, to read. But the thing that really was alarming to me to read in this particular account was that the house that they were in, they actually built not long after the previous catastrophic flood in, I think it was 87. That house was built far enough away and on a high enough stilts that everyone who had assessed after this previous flood said there's no way this will ever flood. This is beyond the 100-year floodplain. Even when we think things are completely certain, we're finding that they are increasingly uncertain. Certainly, the factors of climate change and things like that, what we thought we knew, what we thought was safe, is becoming increasingly not so. So I can't control everything. But what I am finding in this time of uncertainty is that what I can do is to embrace the power of this present moment. I can cultivate resilience and joy now, in this moment, even when the future is unknown. Perhaps in this way, sort of embracing a position or a disposition of uncertainty, even when things do seem stable, can help us to better prepare and navigate for the times when things do feel especially stormy. It seems, when I look around me, as I've said, that so many people are so certain about everything. And I wonder if we might not learn a little bit of a more full way of being from the mystics. I wonder if we might set aside some of our certainty and approach things instead from this sense of unknowing. What might shift in us and what might shift in our relationships? I wonder if we might not discover more of the mystery of whatever is sacred or divine to us. I wonder if we might not come to our discussions and, yes, even our debates with more curiosity and a tendency to look for solutions and shared decisions rather than what seems to be a constant sort of effort to win and defeat others at all cost. And while the unknown can be scary and uncomfortable, perhaps in facing this uncertainty, we can realize that really life overall is uncertain. Perhaps this awareness can help us to live more powerfully in this present moment, to be radically centered in this present moment, to cultivate joy in this present moment, to cultivate resilience in this present moment. Perhaps unknowing can be a gift, whether that be in our spiritual practices, in our interactions with each other, our careers, or in any area of our lives. We want to understand. We want to know. We want to feel that things are clear and make sense. And that's okay, right? That's okay. But perhaps the unknown, be it with these great mysteries or the simple day-to-day pieces of our life, might also be a gift to be explored. So, whether you go from here, certain of your next steps, maybe to lunch, you may already know where you're going. But wherever it is that you go from here, may you go in peace and with courage to walk wherever our paths might be leading. Thank you.